20 years ago, we were treated to the first sequel to a Marvel movie, X2. And this movie, I'm going to say right now, is awesome. And this is Last Page. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on issue number 11 of Last Page. I am Maverick King, joined today by RemingtonCKing, and across the seas of the internet, Jason Cedars. Gentlemen, we watched X-Men, the 2000 movie, recently on a previous issue of Last Page. We have just watched X2, which was a 2003 sequel, and it was the first big sequel to come out from Marvel. And obviously did amazing. Movie had a $110 million budget, which is by today's standards is crazy. It made $214,949,694 at the domestic box office and over $400 million worldwide. This movie was awesome. I love this movie. Initial thoughts is basically everything it does from the first movie. That the first movie does, this movie does better, flushes out the characters. You get a lot of awesome scenes with each character being able to display their powers. There's much more of a human feel to like Jean Grey and Storm as they get pushed to the forefront of the narrative and have to take up commanding the team. Everyone thought that was awesome. The last movie is better in this movie. Remington, your thoughts watching X2 for the first time in a while?
Yeah, I think that... Well, actually, so no, I did. This is a recent rewatch because I watched X1, 2, and 3 just as a refresher less than 6 months ago. So I already had a lot of thoughts going into it, but it's a good just refresher to get extra fresh on it for this episode. But the movie stands the test of time so well. All of the dorkiness and corniness that's in the first movie it's somehow almost entirely removed in this. Almost. There's still some moments, but it's very impressive that they're able to do that in a 3-year jump. It feels so much older or so much newer, more modern than the other movie, and it's only a 3-year difference. So very impressive that the leaps they made, and obviously the bigger budget shows in that. Initial thoughts are, I love this movie. I think you can make a very easy argument. It's top 5 comic book movie of all time. And that is where I will start us off.
Well, I guess I agree with a lot of your points, but I did not enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. I know I was surprised myself. So I'm still, I think throughout this talk, I'll formulate my mind a little bit better because it was last night that I rewatched a movie. But getting out of it, I was just like, wow, okay, that happened. Oh, wow, okay, that actor does this. Or like I said in previous videos, I did lean a little bit onto my, well, that's not comic book accurate, kind of mentality on this one. But all in all, you're right. It is an awesome movie. It is always going to be some of the top 5 of this genre. Just a couple things for it didn't age as well for me. And the focus of the movie on, I guess, relationships, I'll kind of put it, is a very big part of this movie. And I think that took away a little bit from the great pace, the great action, the great fight scenes, the displays of power and things like that. So, initially, no, I always walk away from that movie liking it, but this time I was just like, not as fond as I remember it being. So, but yeah, we'll dive in that a little deeper. But hey, if this ever comes on, I always will watch it.
Before we get to the opening sequence of this movie, you are the aficionado when it comes to X-Men comics, and I am not nearly as familiar as you are. This movie, as far as familiarity with the comics that I have, this movie obviously draws upon the Weapon X program and bringing in the Wolverine's origin and tying that to the plot of this movie. What other comics, or are there other storylines that are from the comics that they incorporate into this movie, or how much of this movie is its own story?
I mean, it's practically like 6 different, comic book arcs, they're trying to throw into this one movie, and it is a lot of origin stuff. And I think what gets me so upset about this the most is the Phoenix Force, the Phoenix Saga, the Phoenix aspect of what they add to Jean Grey, where it's just, it's ridiculous how it's starting to form already in her in this movie. And I think that that's like one of the biggest gripes that I have is it's so comic book inaccurate. And it is, of course, the mutants being the forefront of the political scene and how there is the battle, human mutants and things like that. Like that's a whole different thing. The world origin of Wolverine, the Phoenix stuff, a lot of the Magneto things. These are a lot of different plots and story arcs. I feel like they just smashed into one, and I think it's the accuracies of some of the characters too. Like I think the first one we talk about, like Rogue and Storm and Toad and some of these people that just aren't fleshed out as well. But I feel like even Magneto, like how his character is a couple times this movie is so out of character of him, or even Charles Xavier sometimes with the Magneto and Mystique kind of in that scene in the plane where like chuckling in the corner, making fun of Rogue, like there's this like couple little scenes like that where I'm like, would not be doing that. That's like some
I love that line though. I love that line.
Oh yeah. There's a great line. In that whole scene, yeah, there's great one-liners and stuff, and it's great. You got to play on some of the comic book story arcs and not pull everything and do your own thing. But I think that was what me rewatching it now that I was not able to turn off that switch as well on previous watches.
I think that, I mean, if we're going off of accuracy to characters, it's very subjective, and I think this is absolutely hilarious that we're doing this after Into the Spider-Verse, because Jason, you could give two shits about the accuracy of Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Spider-Punk, Spider-Pigs, Spider-Noir. You could give a fuck about any of that, but it's like, look, Magneto chuckling in a corner. I don't know about you do that sort of thing.
You're right. I really didn't look at it like that. Yeah, I am being just as harsh and critical.
Hey, I get it. Trust me, I understand. I would be upset too, but I'm not, because I think that scene that you're referring to is hilarious. Over there giggling in the corner. It's just one of those moments. It's a rare moment where Magneto's not like super serious.
Yeah,
it's like one of the only. He has like moments where he's mildly amused, but that is a moment where he is just actually giggling, and it's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, I'm also not nearly as in depth on X-Men comics as you are, so I can't speak to that their accuracy quite as much. But through all, I'd say I've definitely absorbed more. I watched the entire X-Men cartoon series, the 91, 92?
92
cartoon series. And most of these characters still feel like they're pulled out, except for the fact that Jean and Storm are tamer. They're not quite as robust in their personalities. They're a little more gentle, which I guess makes sense because they work with kids. So I think it kind of fits that maybe they're not, so emotional or charismatic. I feel like they're both of those characters, and I don't necessarily think that's even on the actresses. Actually, you know what? I will put it on the actresses. I think that's a creative take that they both went with. I think they could have been more. They could have presented their characters a little bit more powerfully, and just didn't. That's why, and I just am a huge fan of those characters in general. So I feel like I do like that they get more screen time in this screen time and lines, and are just better played out in comparison to the first movie. I still feel like they're just a little too underplayed within themselves. And that's my one kind of gripe with how the characters are presented, with the exception of Rogue sucks still, and Bobby's too simpy for me. But other than that,
go ahead, Jason.
just the Rogue and Storm thing, is I think I felt like those were the two most different characters from the first to this one, and then opposite, like Storm getting much more lines and being much more in the center, and then in Paquin, Rogue being, not as much the center, I was, and totally dropping the African accent on Storm too. She's totally, didn't try that again from the first one. But yes, I like how Rogue was not quite as much in the forefront of this movie.
I have a theory that Bryan Singer is an accentist. He hates accents. Every person that's supposed to have an accent doesn't have an accent, except for Nightcrawler. He is the only one that they're like, yes, we are committing to him being German. But Storm is supposed to be African. Rogue is supposed to be from Mississippi. And Pyro is supposed to be a Brit.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, you guys are wrong. And basic American
I think you go back to the first movie and the accents all sucked, and you still have the same cast. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to make them better, their accents, or is it better just, you know what, we're going to streamline it. We'll just have them talk Californian.
Pyro would have definitely been cool as a Brit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things I wrote down here is, underutilized characters, and then kind of, putting some into different directions. Like Pyro being at the school and joining Magneto. Like, I mean, that's cool. It definitely, he is a Brotherhood of Mutants in the comics and stuff, but it's just a strange origin story for him. But,
So you put a bow on the comics versus movie adaptation. I do completely sympathize, Jason, because, for example, the Spider-Man fan, I get very angry at when the iterations of Spider-Man are very off. But for example, I'm not much of a Star Trek fan. I like some of the Star Trek movies, but I enjoy the Chris Pine series. I enjoy those movies, but Star Trek fans seem to hate those movies for some reason. I really enjoy it, but I understand. I completely empathize with the fact that they don't like that it's a completely different tone of movies and the characters are different. I understand, but it's not my hill to die on. My hill is Spider-Man, and just like your hill is X-Men.
Yeah, we all have our hill, and that was a good comparison. You're right. Star Trek is, the love and hate for those new movies. Mm.
The intro, we get the Professor Xavier narration, and then what I referred to in our last X-Men video that we did on the first X-Men movie, the theme of X-Men, John Ottman theme kicks in. Every time I hear it and the title, you just zooming through the CGI, it is so awesome. I get goosebumps just about every time I hear it. I love the intro. You said last time, Jason, that it didn't ring a bell. You were just thinking of the cartoon intro. Did this theme ring a bell when you watched it again?
Yeah, this felt much more like, the X-Men intros in the theater. Yeah, I don't know why the first one didn't stick with me more, but the flying through the CG and the CG surprisingly holds up well, better than I thought, and then those sort of scenes. So you get those goosebump feels when you're starting off that movie, definitely.
Soundtrack is awesome. So good throughout. It's just it feels much more connected to the movie and a part of the movie, whereas the X1 feels very basic and forgettable. So the scene kicking off, or the music kicking off the intro with the dialogue. I like that that's just a recurring theme that they stuck with this movie, which is very Star Trek-esque. And funny with Patrick Stewart as the connector there, but the boldly going where no man has gone before. And they usually they have those lines at the beginning or the end of some Star Trek films, and so it just has a very similar feel, and I love it. I love it. But yes, can we start talking about the opening of this scene?
Oh yeah.
So what I will say is that you get the intro title credits, and then we cut to the White House, which is a beautiful set. They redesigned, the White House. They made it a little wider, because if you've ever been in the White House, it is the smallest. I don't know how they do tours, because everyone just has to walk like this because it's so small. So they make this set of the White House that's larger, and it sets up what I will say is before we got God Mode Yondu in Guardians 2, before we got God Mode Quicksilver in Days of Future Past, this was the first superhero God mode of watching Nightcrawler just run through all these stupid security guards.
And so it's a perfect scene, so ahead of its time. it really feels like you could take this scene, just copy and paste it into a modern movie, and it fits perfectly. The acrobatics, the way that they do his teleportation is awesome. I really like that. It's not so, in the comic books, it always feels just like a puff of, like a big puffy cloud.
Well, and the word too. Remember, it's BAMF. B-A-M-F. BAMF. Yeah.
It always felt like this kind of sort of big puffy cloud that that is like whenever he teleports. And in this, it's very mist and kind of hazy.
Smoky. Yeah.
Yeah, smoky. And I think it looks phenomenal. I remember distinctly the very first time I saw this movie. I was in the living room. It was late. They put it on. The family put it on, and I was getting my hair cut. And they put on X2. I had not even seen X1 at that point. And they put on X2, and I'm sitting there getting my hair cut, watching this intro scene, and I'm just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen on TV. And it still gives me that feeling. So there's hard nostalgia trapped into this. But Nightcrawler is an awesome character, and they nail him in this movie. I think, as far as being pulled straight out of the comics, I can watch this movie, observe Nightcrawler, and it feels just like the sort of character that you could take right out of the comic. I think that the different effects and then how they utilize him, just very OP. Just there is like him at his best. There is no like regular people, whole security guard, like a whole presidential security team is completely outmatched by him with no weapons. He's not using any weapons actually until he pulls the knife out at the end. And then the way that they go through the slow-mo and the scene when they're all waiting for him to come into the Oval Office, and it's the classical music going. That's the really cool part, is they use this classical music scene into the scene. And when the one extra little detail that I love is when he's teleporting so fast that you don't even see him. And it's just the haze is going, and then you see the guys flying around. They do it for a quick second, but it's an awesome detail. And there aren't enough good things I can say about this scene that I haven't already. But yeah, him just basically shredding through everyone, getting to the final. The only thing that would have been better is if he had swords, like his classic swords. That would have really anchored. That's the only way this scene could have been better. Otherwise, it's a 10 of a scene for me. I love this intro. It's so good.
No, he did have the swords. Just White House security checked them at the front. He's like, hey, you have to leave these two. Yeah. But dude, the Blue Elf, man, like he is one of the best characters in this movie. And you're absolutely right. Like portrayed perfectly as far as like how he is in Excalibur and X-Men comics and whatnot. Except for the tattoos. He doesn't really have that in the comic books, but I think it's a great storyline, because he is very religious in the comics. So I think that's another very cool addition to his character. But no, you're so right. It's like one of those, where were you when you first saw that scene, in your life? You'll always remember when that first time I saw the Nightcrawler scene, and me and my buddies, after high school, we would usually go to one of our friends' houses and just watch one of those movies like that. And it was usually Matrix, X2, those type of movies. And we just play scenes sometimes. And it'd be Nightcrawler scene and like, okay, now let's watch Matrix fight scene at the end or something like that, or jump onto some other one. But yeah, it was constantly watched with us growing up and things like that. So yeah, it's like, what a way to kick off the movie. And it sets such a great pace. And how much the mutant war is on the mutants too. It's really showing how powerful the mutants are, and how incapable even like one of the best security forces in the world are. So I think that even sets the tone of like, okay, why people are so scared of the mutant problem, as they like to say in the movie. But yeah, I couldn't ask for a better opening to a movie.
The stupid Homo sapien with his gun that tries to kill Nightcrawler. It's very, like you said, it's funny that you mentioned the Matrix, because this scene clearly was created. Matrix came out in 1999, X-Men came out in 2000, and then this came out in 2003. This still has very much the influence, the fingerprints of the Matrix that brought that that film style where they set up all the cameras and they can do all that cool slow-mo stuff. mean, this really does ratchet it up because it uses those same kind of techniques, but then also incorporates the teleporting. It is an absolute work of art, and it's probably the best scene, fight scene we see in any X-Men movie.
And holds up so well. Like we were just saying, the CG is still so good in this movie, especially in that scene. It's surprising.
We go from that scene to picking up Wolverine's storyline where it left off in the first movie, which is him trying to figure out his past that he cannot remember. So he gets sent to Alkali Lake, where he can't seem to find anything, and then quickly retreats back to the X Mansion.
Hold on, significance of the White Wolf in that scene.
Yes, which is a great transition point, where you see his eyes and then transitions to the wolf's eyes.
Did you catch any what's the symbolism? Is there something? Is there a character callback to of something from like Alpha Strike, or I don't even know. I was trying to think of all the possibilities with that White Wolf.
I just assumed it was he's a beast. We're transitioning to another beast.
Magneto refers to him as the wolf later when he's talking to when Magneto's talking to Xavier at the plastic prison. He says something to the extent of, he's like, you think taking in this lone wolf, or he says taking in the wolf.
Oh, okay.
He refers to Wolverine as the wolf.
Interesting. So we're on the field trip, and we're introduced to John, Pyro, who's now part of the friend group that is Rogue and Bobby. And we've all, I will say, in the interest of being positive, that aside from like one or two scenes that don't make any sense, Rogue is better in this movie in that she doesn't have that accent that she can't hold. And Bobby's just kind of there. We don't really see Bobby it's X-Men 3 does a much better job of showing Bobby's powers than this movie. He pretty much just, there's the confrontation between those three and two bully dudes, which is a cool intro.
He can make Cokes cold. He's really good at making sure your Coke is all nice and chilly. Yeah.
Look, Mom, I can ruin your drink.
Oh yeah, coffee cold. Yeah, I'm really good at turning hot beverages into cold beverages.
Yes, the intro of the characters, Jason. How are you feeling about those? Because we get those three introduced, and then we also get the introduction to Jean Grey's psychic ability getting disturbed and her starting to kind of unravel a little bit.
And it's at that point it's okay with the Jean Grey stuff because you're not as you don't see the fire Phoenix in the eyes or her like displaying Phoenix style powers. So yeah, I think it is something good that Jean is always in this constant battle with her own powers and how powerful she is. So I'm okay with that. And I like that museum scene where they're introducing just mutants trying to integrate into society. The little kid sticking his tongue out at the other little kid, and they're just kind of showing that mutants are all around you. But I always walk away from that's the most powerful part of that scene is Xavier being able to stop everyone. And of course he does like 2 or 3 times throughout the movie again, but that right there showing, how powerful Xavier is, and that's another part of this movie where it's like, holy shit, Xavier's powerful, and of course, what the weapon that he kind of becomes towards the end, but right there at the beginning, you're kind of really hit with that. But yeah, very fine scene is introducing everyone, and especially like Storm, because like we were saying, she had very few lines, then all of a sudden she's now leading a class and talking, and being a character, and and Jada Pinkett, she's looking good in that scene. I mean, that's another part of the movie right there in the beginning, how sexualized the women are. Even Anna Paquin, it's like the guy's like looking down at her cleavage or something like that and giving her eyes and stuff like that and trying to pick her up. And then
that dude has a great,
yeah. And then it's Storm, she's got low cut shirt and she's all bouncing around and everything like that. And then
God bless the early 2000s. I miss those days.
And how close was this to Swordfish? Where we actually
oh yeah. Patrol and Swordfish. And Halle Berry's though, and John Travolta. Come on.
But yeah, it's like immediately sexualized a lot of the female characters and relationships, and you can tell is going to be a big part of this just from that first scene. But I mean, just almost as impactful as the Nightcrawler scene. I really like how that next one is just really setting up a lot of the main characters in this movie.
Sexualized but classy. I think there's a strong difference between kind of just the, women that get thrown to the front as just being sex appeal items. But I think
you're right.
That, especially Famke Janssen as Jean Grey is incredible, and Storm but Halle Berry is great. But I do think there's quite a difference is that their characters are much more fleshed out and they're not just sex appeal items. But your take on the opening field trip introductions?
It's great. Classic high school bully stuff going on. John, I like that there's just these two random kids that aren't part of their field trip, but they just see him they see John with a lighter and they're like, "Hey bro, give me a light." And he's just like, "No, I'm not gonna give you a light." It's like, "What, you're just gonna not give us a light inside of a museum?"
Is this the 70s or 60s where you can smoke?
No, I think that's just like the idea is that these are just two douchey high school kids that are like, "Oh yeah, look, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette inside of a museum. I don't give a fuck."
If it was today, they'd be vaping. Come on, give me a vape, bro.
Give me, Pyro would actually be, his name would just be Vape. But a good intro. I like it because it's very like him just lighting up the dude cigarette and just catching fire is very moderate, because the next time you see his powers, he goes ham on a whole police squad and shreds them down really easily. So I like that. It is quite a leap, but I like it. This is just a very taste of his power, whereas Bobby doesn't get that leap in this movie. He gets in the next one. The best thing that Bobby gets is the ice bricks, the ice wall scene.
Wall,
But before we get there. I think it's just a nice intro, basically being like, all right, these are the three kids of the movie that we're going to have as part of the movie. They kind of set them in early. It's a fun scene. And then, freeze it down. We get Jean Grey is like, okay, she is having more problems. You get a little bit of her and Scott's relationship, kind of where they're at. He's obviously concerned. And then Charles just very casually just freezes a couple thousand people in place, and we're off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I love the shot of when everyone freezes and then it cuts. It's just blurry, and then you just see Professor X's eyes. You see the wheels roll into frame, and then you see it just go from blurry, and then it just comes in on his eyes. Patrick Stewart's basically Jesus Christ. You just like, oh, he's here. He's here to save us from our sins.
But a classic intro for Professor X is always the wheel first. You always see the wheel first.
Totally.
The introduction, the next scene is the introduction of I have loved this actor since I saw him in this movie, and he's been in so many movies, and he's played Hannibal Lecter. He's been in Super Troopers. He is so great in every movie he's in. And it wasn't until Succession, where he plays a media mogul billionaire, that people finally have recognized how great he is. But in this movie, he's one of my all-time favorite villains, Brian Cox as William Stryker. And we get introduced to him courting the president for school reform. And it's such a great opening scene where he is the next evolution. He is the logical next step in the politicized world of the X-Men in these movies, where it is constantly a battle in the Senate and Congress as to mutant rights, mutant registration. In the first movie, it's Senator Kelly, who Mystique pretends to be in this scene. And he is trying to defeat the mutants with the Mutant Registration Act, or trying to take them down. Whereas William Stryker is the blunt force that is coming in and wants the president's permission to take to do a operation on the X Mansion, which to me this scene is a perfect for the time. It wasn't trying to be, I don't believe, but for the time, the president is like, all right, William, you go in, you detain, you question, but the last thing we need is the body of a mutant kid on the 6 o'clock news. And to me, I'm like, this is probably exactly how Dick Cheney told George W. Bush that he was, I'm just going to go into Iraq and find some WMDs.
We're there. I swear they're there. Yeah. I've got pictures. I got pictures of the WMD.
Yeah, here's the aerial photograph. See those barrels? I mean, that could be.
Yeah, it's a plane or maybe some nukes. Who knows? Yeah.
Yes, Jason, your thoughts on William Stryker's introduction and that scene as a whole?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, he is. I mean, doesn't carry this movie as far a great villain, a great. I mean, and I think we've all agreed on this before in the past. Is like a villain is really what makes a movie, you know. And it's like, and yeah, Brian Cox being William Stryker is done phenomenally. What I also take away from that scene is the president offering him whiskey. Like this is now the '60s again, you know. Like we're smoking everywhere and drinking whiskey at every business meeting. You know?
It's an assassination attempt on his life. I think he's allowed to have.
Yeah.
Bourbon.
How soon? Yeah, because he's inspecting the hole in the desk, you know, and I imagine, you know, that's something where presidents for future, you know, presidents will be like, yeah, this is the hole in the desk, or you know.
Totally.
But yeah, such a great scene and such a classic X-Men kind of tale of the political part of it, you know, the Sentinels or Mutant Registration Act, you know, all these things that they very tie politically to these senators and presidents wanting to control the mutant issue and stuff. So yeah, perfectly set up and a great way of like staging, you know, okay, we know of the X Mansion and we know what Charles is doing there, and we're gonna go in and shake these mutants up, you know. But yeah, I mean the premise is a little strange, you know. I guess it is like, this Nightcrawler attack just happened, so I want to attack this school where they're training kids to possibly be doing this in the future. You know, it's a little bit of a leap of, you know, why we're kind of going into the X Mansion. I remember seeing that right there. I was like, okay, this is how they try to make that connection, but it's a little broad because Nightcrawler obviously didn't come from there. Well, maybe in their minds they did, but I feel like the government would be focusing a little bit more on trying to find this Nightcrawler guy than invading a school. But you're right. No, it's great scene of setting up Stryker as this kind of villain for the movie.
Stryker is fantastic. Brian Cox as Stryker is so good and so commanding of the scenes that he's in throughout the whole movie. I really like his range. He doesn't often just lose his mind. He has moments where he gets irritated and gets angry and is very demonstrative, but he at no point in the movie is he just like some foaming at the mouth, like I'd kill all the mutants. He plays it really, really well. With his character, something that was going through my mind is when I watch him is who are the greatest non-super villains in comic book movies.
Mm-hmm.
He ranks in the top as somebody, and it's like, it's confusing because where do you put Two-Face or Roz? Are they super villains or are they villains? Because they're not super, neither is the Joker. The Joker's not super. He feels more like a villain, but those are all three villains that have like a physical fighting angle to them. So whereas Stryker is, the man doesn't throw a punch, doesn't hold a gun, like 0% offense, just puppet master, controlling the pieces, and has his agenda. So I don't exactly know where to put him as far as categories go, but as far as non-super villains, it's as good as it gets.
You're so right. You're so right, because it's like Marvel doesn't have a whole lot of non-powered villains, but DC does. DC does a lot of that aspect. I'm trying to think of a non-powered super or villain in Marvel, and I can't think of another one right here off the top of my head. Like everyone has powers in Marvel.
Yeah, it's pretty much the X-Men because you have Peter Dinklage's character, Trask, Boulevard Trask.
Oh,
He's
Trask.
the other one, which I feel like is a lesser Brian Cox, or a lesser William Stryker. But yeah, he's so commanding. There's multiple scenes in this where he reminds me of Darth Vader. The way he walks, he always walks with purpose. When he walks out of that office, he is walking and Senator Kelly's trying to get his attention and he stops and he tells him,
I was piloting Black Ops missions in the jungles of North Vietnam where you were sucking on your mama's tit at Woodstock, Kelly. Don't lecture me about war. This already is a war.
and then he just walks off. And I'll touch on the most Darth Vader scene in a minute, but that intro is awesome. And then you get Mystique. I love the touch. Mystique is pretending to be Senator Kelly, and I'd love to know how to keep him alive. To keep that, like, does she have to like sleep with Senator Kelly's wife and like take his kids to school so that nobody like questions that he's gone? Because he just walks in and they're like, "Oh yeah, Senator Kelly." It's like nobody. I don't know.
Same thing. Like, how invested is she in this keeping up this persona? Yeah.
But when they say when Brian Cox mentions Magneto, and immediately Mystique asks Senator Kelly, says Eric Lensher, and like there's like a concern in his voice, which is great.
You have access?
Yeah.
Good.
And that sends Mystique down the path of, it is interesting because Mystique knows that he's about to commit this raid on the X-Mansion, does nothing to help him. Her mission is just to get Eric out, to get Magneto out.
That's a really good point. I didn't necessarily think of that angle, but yeah, she definitely doesn't. I mean, through and through, she does not care. Nothing she does is ever out of mercy or compassion or sympathy for anybody that's not Magneto. Again, still not sure if her and Magneto slept together, but very possibly.
Oh no, that's confirmed in this movie.
When?
Later in the movie, when they're like, "Oh, she's good," and he's like, "You have no idea."
Oh yeah,
100% guaranteed they're boning.
Oh man, I was going to say we'll get to these scenes later, but Mystique.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say Mystique has so many good scenes in this movie.
God, so great.
I kind of do forget that I'm like, oh, she has her intro as. And I count the scenes when she's not Mystique as well as Mystique scenes, because it's, even though there's, the actor that plays Senator Kelly is still playing Senator Kelly, I think of this as more as the Mystique character, whether she's and how it's written. She like how this character is written. So Senator Kelly as the intro, her changing to Lady Deathstrike, and the janitor when she's getting the info and using William Stryker's voice. I like that it's something they incorporated in this movie twice. She imitates Stryker's voice and imitates Nightcrawler's voice. And dude, she is just, I think Mystique is just, I categorize her as being the ultimate spy, because she is very spy-like with how she sneaks in places, infiltrates, jabbing dudes in the ass with a shot full of iron, and like with the knockout pills, roofies. So many great scenes for Mystique in this movie. She is a candidate for MVP. I'm not going to quite put her in there, but she does get votes. She does get votes.
Sure. Be more right about Mystique being a scene stealer, and then the amount of dialogue that she has is very, very minimal. And I wrote in my notes that she's like the queen of espionage, and that's it's such an angle that I don't remember them playing as much in the comics, as far as Mystique as a character. I mean, she's like a leader, the Brotherhood of Mutants, and she has this kind of her own agendas and stuff. But being the spy, being this Mission Impossible style character is such a great angle for her in the movie. And she steals the scenes without having to say too much, just being her. Yeah.
I think something I just think about with this movie is I think they do such a good job with all of the characters of, you don't have to have giant laser blast through wall type powers to be incredibly effective. Nightcrawler can teleport, and that's basically the only power he has, right? I mean, he's very acrobatic and he can do flips, but Nightcrawler has one real power, and that's teleportation. Mystique has one real power, and that's just being able to transform into whoever. And so, but they're so incredibly effective at doing what they want to do, or they do such a great job of showcasing how useful their powers are. I mean, being able to walk through, like I would say, Kitty Pryde, just very briefly, running through walls. I think
falls to the bed first. So
that's her sinking right through the bed. There's so many great moments where people use their powers in very, very creative ways.
So that scene basically, we see William Stryker take advantage of the presidential crisis, where he gets him to authorize a raid on the X Mansion. We are also introduced in that scene to Kamiko, Lady Deathstrike. Now, I love the ways they show Lady Deathstrike in this, other than in the comics / cartoon, she looks like a straight up demon. Like, she is demonic looking in the comics. In this, she doesn't have any lines. She just has moments where they just show her cracking her knuckles or giving the handshake, and Senator Kelly's like, oh, quite a handshake. He's like grabbing his hand and just like sore and stuff. Jason, how do you feel about Lady Deathstrike's interpretation in this, where they make her much more Matrix-like with the black leather that she's always wearing?
I absolutely hated her. Like, she was one of the worst characters in this movie. And it's like, and I remember thinking that the first time, with me being like, oh, that's not comic book accurate. And it is so horribly inaccurate as far as what she is in the comics to what they portray her as. And so underutilized. It's just the only thing that she's in the whole movie for is a throwaway line at the very end where he's like, I thought you were the only one, Wolverine, kind of thing. But then there was another. So it's just showing that Wolverine wasn't as unique as everyone portrayed him as, that he could do this to someone else, but so horribly portrayed. Yeah. I mean, great if you don't know anything about what Lady Deathstrike was, as far as the comics and what character she should be. And I mean, a love interest to Wolverine at points, like Japanese mafia or Yakuza, daughter, that gets this, and then he falls in love. This whole Japanese kind of aspect to his life is so much about her, and how they could have used that character at other points in like the Logan movie or in future X-Men movies, but they fucking kill her off in the stupidest way. And then just, I got to stop right now. I'm going to get real heated. That was one of those Peter Parker moments for me where it's like, this is a horrible rendition of it. But all that aside, as far as what she is just like a bodyguard that William Stryker's using. I mean, she definitely fills that gap.
I do not have so much of an emotional attachment to Lady Deathstrike. Most of my Lady Deathstrike knowledge comes from video games and this movie, and some comics, but not much. So of all the villains, like I just don't have much of an emotional attachment to her. So I like you have said, you kind of referenced her to having a Matrix look. She actually gives me more of in the way she fights, gives me more of a Quentin Tarantino, Kill Bill, not quite as ridiculous with like floating midair, but just, I think, again, maybe it is, maybe that is, this is just another way of saying Matrix, but with her fight with Logan later on, and when she's at the plastic prison, she just, she has, I don't know why, she just reminded me of like a Quentin Tarantino character. With
Uma Thurman kind of look to her almost, with a
lot less dialogue than Quentin Tarantino character would have. But actually, I do think she does have one line. I think to the Mystique as the janitor, she's like, "What are you doing?" Or she says,
"Right."
He's like, and he's just like,
"Bashura,
basura,
trash." Or garbage,
And
he has nightmares for the rest of his life because of that.
He sees himself walking by.
Especially if that guy was stoned on the job, like he was stoned, you have to just be like, no way, I got
like him getting a flask and like dumping it out or something like that. Back.
There's definitely a crossover with. The Matrix and the Kill Bill movies are obviously inspired by martial arts movies from across the sea, and foreign movies. So those influences, those are two of the westernized. And then Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out 2002, I think.
Yeah, right around that time.
So there's definitely, I don't know if this movie was filmed before or after that the movie came out, but there's definitely a crossover there. So we move on to Professor X. Prior to the raid, Professor X and Scott go to meet with Magneto in his plastic prison. And no one's figured out that Cyclops can shoot laser beams from his glasses, apparently. Nobody remembers the Liberty Island incident. or I don't know, it was just underreported, but he's able to get in there with his glasses.
We're still questioning this massive. It's not some fashion style. This is definitely something. Why wouldn't anyone be like, oh, you got to coat check that thing? It's like,
yeah.
No, yeah.
Well, actually, okay. So before those two meet with Magneto, Stryker meets with Magneto, and that's when we find out that Magneto has mind control, basically a very convenient plot device where that's how he is controlling. That's how he is the one behind the Nightcrawler attack, because he basically has this mind control ability. Does the same thing to Lady Deathstrike.
On that note, well, it is a plot device, but it's fluid secreted from his son's brain. They mentioned that later. That the mind control device is he's like, it's like fluid taken from his son's brain produces this fluid, and he uses that because his son's the illusionist. I know, that's the first time I picked it up watching this. Because I was like, oh, it's not just some random truth serum drug; it's that. So
you see his son,
which I think is a nice, bit of a nicer plot point.
Yeah, it's like poetry; it rhymes. I like it. So yes, that's where kind of the tragedy of Lady Deathstrike. Not to linger on her, but it is kind of sad because there's just that one moment where she has that self-realization, and then quickly he just puts it back into her neck, and it's like, yeah, she like might be a nice person. Just maybe she's just like Wolverine, but under my control. But yeah, that scene as a whole,
with Magneto, yeah, it is one of those moments where, you really start to feel bad for Magneto, and everybody. That's the thing, is does anybody actually watch the X-Men movies being like, "Fuck Magneto"? No way, dude. You're the man can have the most terrorist level plot, and you're still just like
literally is trying to genocide. At the end of this movie, is it becoming genocidal? And you're like, well, they did
from a certain point of view.
From my point of view, the humans are evil.
I mean, and it is Ian too, Ian McKellen.
The back and forth.
Hate him. Yeah. But I mean, just like Patrick Stewart, forever old. They are forever wrinkly. It's like that's like 20 years ago, and you're like, you look exactly the same as you did then as you do now. But I actually really like that scene. I love you should have killed me when you had the chance.
I love that line. So
as he's slipping down the wall, right there. But I also feel like when you're asking about the Mystique's not caring about the school being invaded so much, you kind of feel that with Magneto. He's like, well, you kind of fucked me over, so this is like what you get.
I disagree with that.
Interesting, because
Magneto has the line, like there's the moment where he's like, what have you done? Or Charles Xavier, he realizes that Magneto has given up the information as to where the school is to help Stryker out, and all the information about Cerebro. He's given that under mind control. He's given it to Stryker, and there's a moment of look on Magneto's face where he's like, "I'm sorry." He says like, "I'm sorry," to some extent.
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, like you could tell that's why it's different between him and Mystique, because it feels like, despite their differences, no way would Magneto ever want to give up mutant to a human. And yet, like Mystique, she doesn't give a fuck.
That's a good point.
Little resentment, I think.
Magneto, I mean, his he has some ebbs and flows with how much sympathy and empathy he has for Charles. Because I mean, by the end of the movie, he's just like, I'm sorry. Like fully thinking, sending him off to his death. But he is regretful, and I think he is, and it is one of those things where he has a fine line where he might fight mutants without fighting him, but I don't think he would ever give up mutants to a human, Homo sapien of all creatures. So that scene, as I say, setting, as you get some good Cyclops Lady Deathstrike. She basically, he blasts her, thinks she's done, and then she just hops on him, gives him the old leg flip thing, and he's out.
Well, I'm not sure if the shot that she shot him with, if that pierced, because she shoots him with like a tranquilizer, and
I assume his suit.
I don't know if that or if it just was delayed, because you do barely see it on his. I don't know. It wasn't very clear if that helped or if it was just a one strike.
Well, in the X Mansion when they use it, it's instantaneous. All the kids get pass out immediately. So I assume,
but he's not a kid.
He's not a kid. So I took it as just like it didn't.
Might have been a one-shot knockout.
Yeah, it could have been.
It was a little too easy to subdue Professor X and Cyclops that way, and it was just like gas that got Professor X or something like that, and it's just like his power should have been able to just wipe out everyone in a block radius there. But yeah, I mean, plot device. Yep, they needed to have him and Cyclops get into the base and stuff. So understand that scene, but
we don't really. It is unfortunate because I feel like Cyclops is the most shortchanged in this, or one of the most shortchanged in this movie. We don't get to see him in the first movie. He's just the douchey boyfriend. In this movie, he is quickly mind controlled, and then he's just kind of a pawn. We don't really get to see him ever lead the X-Men, which I feel is an unfortunate miss. You do get, because of that, because you put Cyclops to the side, you get to flush out Jean Grey and Storm and some of the others, so that there is that. But I do feel like Cyclops was a bit of an unfortunate miss in this movie.
Yeah, I have Cyclops and Colossus as my two big misses. Personally, just because I'm a big Colossus fan. I like the big metal man. And I think, again, accentist. Not Russian. Not Russian.
Right, yeah.
I'm building a case here against Bryan Singer.
Well,
that has
added to the list.
That has already been built.
Or other people, yes, yeah.
So, as if he wasn't bad enough. Anyway, Cyclops very underutilized, and I mean in X3 they just straight up just off him right out the gate. So yeah, he's much better and much more included in X-Men 1, X-Men 2. It feels like he just really isn't there for most of the movie. And you get a little bit, and so you get a little bit of his relationship with Jean and Grey at the beginning, and then at the end it kind of builds and to the finale. But it is unfortunate because I really like James Marsden, and I think he plays a great Cyclops, and so it's unfortunate that he just is kind of the one that gets really the shortest end of the stick in this movie.
One thing that's like classic with X-Men is the leader changes a lot within, the X-Men teams and X-Men as they move forward with as far as the changing of the role or the cast of whatever the X-Men, and then X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, X-Men Red, they have all these teams and stuff. So I felt like they actually did a good job because Storm is a leader for a while, that even that kind of putting that mantle on a couple other characters within, like Wolverine kind of being the leader of the little kids, running off to Bobby's house and things. So they had this leader role kind of shifting between a lot of the X-Men during this movie.
Jean Grey and Storm go off to get Nightcrawler because Professor X has located him with Cerebro. They go to Boston to retrieve him, and Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler is amazing.
Get out as he's going around in the church. Yeah.
Beautiful accent. I don't know. Like, I'm not German. I don't know if that to a German, they just be like 99999. But for me, that's like a really great accent. He sounds German every line. There's never like a slip or anything. But the humanity and the tragedy of his character, he has all of the tattoos that represents his sins. He
in the circus, they called me Nightcrawler. I love the
repeating line of my name is Kurt Wagner. But in the Munich circus, I was the incredible Nightcrawler. I love the funny little moments, but there's also great sadness with his character, but also awesome moments of his powers. And that's the point. They meet at the church, and we get the kind of exchanging of cultures to an extent with the two X-Men and the Incredible Nightcrawler.
Awesome scene. I think they do such a good job with his character in this movie. They get him in a church, like that's where he goes to hide. Is a church, like an empty, like it looks like it might be abandoned or just I don't remember if it's abandoned, but just old.
It's like boarded up and
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, it's like his abandoned church, and like that's his hide. He's gonna go and hide. Now that he's regained his senses and he's kind of scared, and just kind of shelling up. And I like that. Yeah, Storm comes in and just like uses a gust of wind to just suck him right out of the rafters.
Oh no, it's a lightning bolt. He goes.
Yeah, that's right. She knocks him off.
Yeah, and then Jean catches him, which he could have teleported easily at any of those moments. When he's just being held. Well, I don't know if you're holding someone with those powers.
She prevents, not to jump ahead, but she does use her powers later to prevent him from teleporting.
Oh yeah, you're right. Then okay, so it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Only thing that I didn't like quite about that Nightcrawler scene in the church is, and I understand it's a plot device and they're moving that part of the story forward, but they're talking about his tattoos and he just kind of turns over and does one of these. He's got no tattoos on his back. I don't know what he's showing them, but then she notices the little, the drop burn or scar in his neck, and then she's like, "Ooh, what's this?" And we connect that as far as the audience, and then they connect it later. But it doesn't seem appropriate for him to be showing them his back of his neck at that point. So
I believe he's covering up because he's ashamed of his many sins, and so he's covering up his sins.
Well, and then he just does this slight turn. They're both right there, and he just kind of turns on his side, to kind of away from them. It's just a strange scene.
There is definitely a maternal aspect that we get. And you mentioned earlier, Tamer, Jean Grey, and Storm, and they are definitely they bringing Nightcrawler into the fold. There is definitely a maternal touch that they have with the children of the school, Nightcrawler, the other members of the X-Men. We then transition to one of the all-time great comic book movie scenes. The raid on the mansion, where you got Wolverine hanging out, trying to find beer, can't find beer, drinking sodas.
You got any beer? This is a school. Is that a no? Yeah, that's another great one-liner. Yeah.
And yeah, you get these Black Ops dudes that come raiding the mansion, and you see Wolverine at true peak Wolverine. Dispatching fools. The guys that come in and he's chopping the guns when he's grabbing the guns, the guy's gun, and his claws come out and he rams him into the fridge or the wall, and it's just a blood curdling scream. Oh, it's so good! It's so good.
We get the berserker mode of Wolverine, that you always talk about. It's like that berserker barrage coming out.
I have this written down as this scene is the true beginning of Hugh Jackman's greatness as Wolverine. It's because in my mind's eye, he doesn't have any really ferocious moments in X-Men 1. Like we don't get he does scream, he does yell when he's fighting
Mystique at the end, yeah.
But it's so, in my mind's eye, it's so much tamer than the Wolverine that we get in this scene, and it is awesome. It is when that scream when he punctures him, and then just I call it the mansion clearing. He just starts clearing out the mansion. It's awesome, and it's actually it's so violent, but there's still no blood.
Mm-hmm.
That's the funny thing is there's no blood. They don't do any blood splatter for to keep it PG-13, I guess. But there's so many great moments when he stabs the guy's foot. He's waiting for him to come around the corner, and he jams his foot and jams him in the chest or whatever. Jumping off the balcony with his claws. He jams him down.
Great if you watch the behind the scenes of this movie, Hugh Jackman they were talking about doing that scene, and he's like, all right, well, I want to see my stuntman do it first, and then I'll think about it. And so the stuntman, they have a mattress just below, and he jumps and does it. And he's like, all right. And so he does it. And then so he actually jumps and does the stunt. Really cool. And again, props to any actor that puts himself out like that, that's willing to do something. Because you see, they have the shot of him and his ferocious face jumping like this. It really brings it home. And it's much cooler than, a side shot, or now they can just do CGI faces over stuntmen. But really appreciate that touch.
Yeah, much better than Tom Cruise, when he does his own things.
Okay. First of all, you're trying to ran so that Hugh Jackman could walk. Literally. Anyway, Jason, your thoughts on Wolverine and the raid and the raid on the mansion?
I remember, that scene. That was another one where, where were you when you saw Nightcrawler Scene? Like, I so remember like the impact of that scene first watching it, because it's a slippery slope when you're trying to have Wolverine with claws and things like that. Actually, what is he just going to do? Like punch these guys in the head and knock them out and things like that. And so I remember being so happy that he starts just stabbing people, it's just like, yes, thank you for not trying to like PC this PG it, so much that we actually get to see this Berserker Wolverine, being, so much what we love him in the comics. So I'm really glad that they fleshed that out. But I mean, it's almost overshadowed by, we finally get to see all the kids' powers within the school. It's like you see Colossus, doing his thing. You see the girl screaming. I remember that being such a cool scene, like that high pitched scream while you're in the theaters where you're even being like annoyed by this. You're like, just make it stop, and Kitty Pryde falling through the bed, and then how all these other kids are kind of getting away from the Black Op thing, but then of course Wolverine and the three other kids kind of making a little bit of a stand. But yeah, that is one of the best scenes in the movie. We finally get the kind of the Stryker Wolverine first talk, and then of course Bobby doing the ice wall. So it's like all of these really, really great movement points for a lot of these characters, and then of course the underutilization of Colossus in that scene right there is, I mean, it's not until like Deadpool that we really get to see a cool Colossus, because like you said, Days of Future Past, like, is that right, where he gets killed just right in the beginning of the movie, like just
and
and then in the future? But man, I gotta rewatch that one. It's been a little while, but that's by far one of the best scenes in the movie is the raid.
The Colossus is so underutilized. Just I mean, you really only get one little scene for him where he walks into the room and steals up. Like steals up and then just throws the two dudes through the wall. And it's like, you don't even see him do it. You just see him step in, and then the guy goes flying through the wall, which is cool and fine, but just really wish it could have gotten more of him. Where does Colossus and the kids go? He takes a group of kids, go through the wall, never heard from again. They're safe, I guess. They're safe nowhere.
It feels like there's multiple groups of kids that are just scattered. It's not just like Colossus and his group. There's got to be at least one, because they say they only brought 6 kids back, and they show that school full of kids, at multiple times throughout the movie. So you're right. Are they all just hiding in the woods?
I assume there's a safe house somewhere, but then Stryker just gets a few, and he's like, all right, I've got, and Cerebro, and he got what he wanted, and that's it. But it is funny that they don't mention it at all. They take off in the Miata, I think, or not a Miata.
No, it's a WRX, I think. Oh. Yeah, and of course it's Cyclops' car.
Cyclops Mazda, and they take off, and then it's just like, all right, well, I'm sure Colossus and the kids are fine, but
the confrontation between Wolverine and Stryker, and another ferocious moment of, you want to shoot me, then shoot me. Don't shoot him.
I have that written down as one of my favorite lines in this movie. You want to shoot me? Shoot me.
Yeah.
And you start to finally get that the past of Wolverine that we don't get in the first movie, where he can't remember what happened, and then he's sent to Alkali Lake, comes back at the beginning of this movie, doesn't have any more answers, we start to get this, all right, what's happening? This guy is connected to his past. Wolverine is experiencing, you start to see those nightmares that he has of people drinking this champagne and everything while the Weapon X program is happening, and they're putting the adamantium in him, which I'm not sure at this point. I don't think Bone Claws, they never reference, or they don't even talk about the way they show it in the flashbacks, where we get a Wolverine like looking at his claws, and then there's the line of Stryker saying, you've always been an animal, Wolverine, I just gave you claws. And it's almost like they said that it's more that he gave him his claw, like he put the adamantium in him, whereas instead of him having claws and put it over, it's kind of just a detail that I think they leave out.
Well, it's a kind of a weird point in even the comic books. It's like, did Wolverine always have bone claws beforehand? I don't think so. I think it's something with the adamantium being put on him. He developed those bones that go underneath it. Because, yeah, when Magneto pulls out all the adamantium out of Wolverine in the comics, yeah, that's when he's all bone clawed and stuff like that. And he breaks his claws constantly and, has to regrow them. So, but there's not a whole lot of like Wolverine before adamantium using bone claws in the comics. So yeah, I bet that was kind of a weird, territory they had to travel to explain.
But the greatness of the ice wall that Bobby puts up, and then there's a great moment of Wolverine putting his hand up and Stryker putting his hand up. It's a tremendous just touch in that of bridging the gap of not only Wolverine's past, but also the plot of the movie. And this guy that is responsible for creating Wolverine is also the guy that's trying to destroy all mutants. And you get both of those encapsulated in this.
It's very Star Trek. Again, I'm going to another Star Trek reference. Kirk and Spock.
Oh, the death scene. Oh, yeah, the death scene.
Well, Wolverine putting his hand up and Stryker, one could say, two sides of the same coin.
Yes. Beautiful. I love it. Where the running.
Stupid.
You beat me to it, man. Yeah.
I don't have much else to say on that scene. I think it's great. It's very it's a great piece of cinema, and I think it's I like that Wolverine is just like he's upset initially. When Bobby puts up the wall, he's like, no, and the kids have to be like, we won't be okay. He's like, okay, damn it, I'll take care of it.
One of the there's great things about just Wolverine in general in the comics is the different suits that he has. What he wears throughout his career and things. Changes colors and spandex and things. But one of his greatest outfits is the Weapon X, outfit where he is pretty much naked and he's got like this almost Cyclops style helmet thing on where it's this red and it's got wires coming off of it. It's even, I think it's got some like underwear that's essentially like metal underwear or something like that, and just wires and things hanging off of him, and he's all wet, dripping, like claws out. So I am upset that we didn't get to see the Weapon X kind of outfit where he doesn't come out of the adamantium chamber just naked. There is just stuff all over him, and I wish he would have been like running around with all of that gear on in the flashback. So,
well, it's First Class.
No, actually, I think it's X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh, it is X-Men Apocalypse.
X-Men Apocalypse is when we actually the only time. Well, not the only time, but Wolverine Origins, if we count that as a real movie.
Nah.
But yeah, where you see him in that exact suit, and they go to. I forget how they even make that tie-in, but it's
yeah. When we talk about hated things in life, Apocalypse is
good God,
the movie. I
think
I saw
started. I will not stop.
Yes, yeah. Let's save that for another day. Yeah.
The Darth Vader moment that from earlier, Stryker stabs the ice wall with a grenade or a bomb, and then everyone runs out, and then he just walks out of frame, and the second he's out of frame, it blows up, and then they're all gone, and there's this shot of Stryker's face, and he is just upset that he let Lando Calrissian get away in the Millennium Falcon, and so he just ducks his head and turns around and just power walks out. It's so Darth Vader. Like, I love that shot so much, especially before that, he gets off the helicopter and he's just in black. Like, he's just in shadow. You see him, like all the Black Ops guys get out of the helicopter and he's just in shadow. You don't even see his face. Love the way he shot. Love the way his performance is. That is a great ending, or a great part of that sequence. We move on to the Magneto escaping because of Mystique's brilliance.
Yeah, let's talk about the Mystique bar scene. I think that's where it goes.
Yeah,
to.
Jason, take it away. Talk to me about Rebecca Romijn.
I know when we started the show, it's like, oh my God, any girl with a beer already, in hand, coming and sit down and next to you. But I mean, there's so many like great one-liners just with that when that scene. It's like, and yeah, her, wow, you're aggressive, and wow, I've never hooked up with a hooker like you before. Just all of these like great little things that he says. But one thing that is always confusing to me is he's sitting there and he's pissed about what's going on TV. It's like, turn that shit down, and then they're just talking about the mutant stuff. So you don't really know where he falls. I mean, of course, we all think he hates mutants, but you would think he'd be like, yeah, I want to hear this hateful rhetoric, even more, So do we just get a connection issue?
I just saw a connection.
Reconnected.
All right. Well, good news is that we've proven that Zencastr, when called upon, can help. Apparently.
Nice. But yeah, no, I absolutely love that scene where he just flips him over, stabs him in the butt with the iron thing, and we go along. We're like, I see where this is going, sort of thing.
First introduction of Hank McCoy on the TV.
Yeah.
And non-blue, he's human.
Yeah, you're right.
I remember first time watching that, being like, ooh, Beast is in here somewhere.
They do that a couple times in the movie. Or the other one was where Mystique is searching for the files, and you see Remy LeBeau. Yeah, there's a couple other names. I think that's even like
Havoc's name might be in there. Is it Alex Summers? I don't remember, but yeah, there's a couple other names.
Yeah, a couple other names. But yeah, I love those little references, and it's the only thing that another underutilized with the kids at the school. I wish we had a couple more dusted in of just older, newer X-Men characters as the kids. But yeah, Hank McCoy being on the TV was a cool little nod.
It's great. Always nice to see Rebecca Romijn in the flesh, the actual flesh, which we see her again in X3 when she gets shot and changed back. But yes, very, very nice addition to the film, that little scene there.
I mean, just another point where it's just very sexualized, very, we have just a different feel to this movie. It's not so kiddie, we get a lot more of these, those scenes like that.
Bring sex back to superhero movies. That's what I have to say. The touch that you mentioned, so the guy being like, turn that shit off, Lou. I believe that's because he just doesn't want to hear about work.
Yeah.
It's his work is to literally take care of a mutant or be a
take care
of prison guard of a mutant. So yeah, I think that's just him. He just wants his mind off of work, gets his mind off of work because Rebecca Romijn, I mean, bonk alert, big time. Woof. She's incredible. Then we get him coming back. Just the afterglow. The afterglow.
A great day.
His step that he's got right there, I mean, is so palpable. It's great.
It's funny because they don't actually fuck. They make out, and then he wakes up in the bathroom, and I think
he doesn't know. He doesn't know. Yeah, he thinks he did. He's like, "Oh man, I was so good. I had to be so good."
And the shot of Magneto asleep and the smile that grows. There's something different about you. I mean,
too much iron in your blood. Yeah,
pulling all the iron out of his blood, turning it into a stepping stone that he can get on, and then just shooting the metal balls just in and out. I mean, what a escape! Great escape,
dude. When he's got his arms crossed and he's and the two are spinning around him, and that's like goosebumps chill, like one of the best scenes. And Jesus, how much destruction he causes with just a small piece of metal,
Again, just a very creative, awesome way of utilizing Magneto's power, showing him rather than just controlling metal, him pulling excess iron out of somebody's blood. I mean, it's the bloodiest scene in the movie. Because I mean, anything with Logan and Lady Deathstrike heals up immediately. So you pull all the iron out, it's just like this. It's so much blood just kind of comes straight out of his body. And then I love that it's John Wick killing 10 guys with a pencil. He doesn't need much, a little bit of metal, and he's like, and nobody's a match for him. So I love that. Yeah, the shredding of everything and just spinning around, and it makes it look so easy. Awesome. Beautiful scene.
To paraphrase South Park, you gave him a paperclip? It would be like that. If you brought a paperclip into Magneto,
He's just shooting a paperclip. It would actually be funny.
Oh, it'd be like Yondu scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then we get Bobby bringing the X-Men that he's with to his parents' home in a very analogous scene to a person having to come out of the closet to their parents. And
we still love you.
Which, Bobby's gay in the comics. So I feel like that's
no, that's a retcon. That's a retcon. That's
maybe
anything that happens, and I'm just going to put this out there and this has to do with any major character changes. Anything that happened after Disney bought Marvel is fan fiction. That's canon. I just said it so. Anyway, moving on. Yes, there is a very analogous scene to someone coming out to their parents and having a Homo sapien bigot of a brother who rats on him. And they kind of just stay there and they just kind of talk until we get the Pyro scene. But any thoughts about the interaction with from the car driving, and they're in the car and they get to the house and they're just kind of in a holding pattern until they can make contact with Storm and Jean Grey.
Have you ever thought about not being gay?
Not being a mutant? Yeah.
It's a really good scene. I like it. It's very simple. Just anchors like a day in the life of trying to be a mutant and having to deal with your parents not understanding or not being happy about it. And they're not and the parents aren't so bigoted that they're just like disgusted. They don't understand. They're stressed out. They have negative connotations with mutants, but they're like still trying to tell their son that they love them. So I really like that scene. And then his little brother just being a little shithead. I think it's a good and they don't take a long time. It's very brief, but I think it's just a really well done, grounded scene.
Honestly, one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Like when I went back and watched it, we have so much great action scenes, but like that's so much what X-Men is. It's like what, being a mutant to what that means to the people around you, and then being a mutant, on the run and having to, go to this house, to kind of like get their clothes, figure out what the next step is. It's such a good point in the movie where we get just this little break, on what just has happened and setting up for, the finale of this movie. But no, so many great scenes. I mean, I like the Bobby Rogue kiss. I think that's a really cool aspect where, they're just keep on fighting with it. And so they embrace it, and her like blowing, the cold breath, afterwards and stuff like that. I always remember that being cool. But then, and then just how the mom and dad are towards Bobby. And actually, no, when they walk in the house and Wolverine's just chugging a beer in their kitchen. It's like, I cannot believe Dad didn't just like start attacking and be like, hey, who are you? Just some massive dude in a wife beater just chugging beer with next to the cat. Like, I don't know if it was like right there at that point. Yeah. Which is such a funny scene where Wolverine's first reaction is to turn around stabby mode. If it was like one of the kids or like the actual mom or dad or something like that, and he just, and it's like, and the cat licks it. I know what they're trying to do right there. We're trying to be a little funny, but I thought that was a kind of a clever, funny scene. But I know, so much of the dialogue there between, the parents and Wolverine and Bobby and things like that, and how the parents are reacting, and then Pyro being such an asswipe, to the parents and everyone like that, and his little quips and one-liners that he has. But when the cops show up and everything like that, that's such a cool scene where it's like, put the knives down. It's like, I can't, and he does that movement and just gets the bullet straight to the forehead, and he's down and stuff like that. And it's and then Pyro kind of going crazy, and then Rogue pulling his powers out of him, and then just them walking away, and the cops being just absolutely dumbfounded and like rolling around the ground, and then they just stroll over him, and take off in the jet. It's just it's a very just funny, just very concise scene of what kind of happens within it. So I enjoy that. It's almost like a movie in its own, that little scene.
This is Professor Logan. What do you think? Art.
I know I would have gone PE teacher or something a little more like football or something like that, but art's okay.
It's my favorite Rogue scene that we ever get, which is Pyro goes ham, really cool. has a great early 2000s line of, all those mutants you're hearing about on TV?
Yeah.
And just, I mean, the effects, and that is, the practicality where they're it's obviously CGI flame, but the police cars that they're wiring up and dropping on them and destroying them, it's really a cool touch. And then I love Rogue using her very comic powers, which we see in the first movie where she heals herself, but in this where she grabs his ankle and then, extinguishes the flame. Is a great way of showing Pyro, but then also showing Rogue's abilities. And Bobby doesn't get to do shit, but I do like that.
He turns coffee into a block of ice block coffee. Yes.
there is he was far ahead of his time when it came to iced frappuccinos.
They definitely didn't have iced frappuccinos before 2003.
2003, I feel like that's probably the first time I had an iced frappuccino, so I just imagine that's the origin date.
Wait, when did Austin Powers come out? Because they talk about he's an investor in Starbucks. That's the. I always think about that as Starbucks. It's like, Dr. Evil owns part of Starbucks.
Fantastic scene for Pyro. Really cool. We get the ramped up, like I said earlier, we get the ramping up of his power, just seeing what he can do. Again, another creative, great use of just one mutant. And that's when later on when Magneto says, when he's just like, I can't create the flame, I can only control it. Magneto says, gods amongst insects.
Insects. And that always sticks with me. Not God amongst humans, God amongst insects.
And that's just really how all these mutants make you feel when they're with like how they showcase their powers. It's just one dude and a lighter. And like these police can't do anything. Like there's a dozen of them. And yeah, just blows them up. And then he just gets that, like, he just goes from being like self-defense-y to I'm going to burn them alive in their car.
Those two cops in the car. I'm like, okay, whoa. That's where we get to see the villainous side.
Yes. So I like that. Yeah, I mean, you get the idea that he's a dick, but then that's really when it kicks up to like, oh no, this man will kill somebody if he's given a good enough reason.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Cena's done awesome. Rogue's best moment. Real quick note, last note on that is the relationship dynamic between her and Bobby is, how old are they supposed to be? 17? 17?
38. Shout out Fetty Wap.
He turns away when she's changing.
Oh yeah.
He turns away. I'm like, how old are you guys? You're telling me your boyfriend and girlfriend, you can't see her in her underwear or, God forbid, her bare ass? Like, it was about some really funny scene. I'm like, it's so innocent.
What's the line from Back to the Future? Just like, it's like, no, babe, I'm not that kind of girl. Or maybe you are, whatever he says.
Oh, God, in the car. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, she's a Southern lady. She's like, I'm a lady. I'm not some tramp. But yeah, so
they've only kissed once. They're moving slowly.
Yeah, right? very slowly. I mean, if you can only kiss, I mean, at least maybe get a look or two. Shit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, that was the last thought I had on that scene.
We are introduced to Jason, which is a very interesting. I don't know anything of Jason comic wise, but
so yeah, I think it's a made up character for this.
They just made him up to shoehorn him in here to.
Oh yeah.
So they meet up after the Pyro scene. The X-Men are reunited with Jean Grey and Storm, and they take off in the X-Jet. They're going to go meet up with Magneto and Mystique. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Jason, who is Stryker's son, who we found out used to be a mutant, or used to be a student that Stryker dropped off apparently with Professor X. Which if he did, then he did, but he doesn't know.
He doesn't know about Cerebro.
But he knows where the X.
He knows where the X-Men Mansion is. That's not a secret. Okay. The X-Mansion is, it's not a secret.
They all know, right?
They all know the X-Men exists. It's just the secrets within.
So then Jason is this two-eyed colored, does not speak, but is incredibly powerful. And Stryker uses him to control Professor X and trick Professor X into basically going into a dream state. And he's going to use the recreated Cerebro at Alkali Lake to try to wipe out all the mutants, because Professor X is so strong, if he focuses too much on Cerebro, he will destroy all mutants or the group of people he's focusing on. Jason, your thoughts on the incorporation of this character, Jason, as this guy that can control Professor X, and the story of him kind of in this dreamlike state?
I really like it. I really like how they made this connection of Stryker having a kid that is a mutant. You know, it's like for him, you know, not having this empathy towards mutants, even when it's his own son, you know. And I think he either says in that scene or in a later one where my son died a long time ago. You know, he doesn't even look at Jason being his son anymore. It's just a tool for him to use, essentially. You know, and I remember still to this day that being another impactful scene because he's describing his wife's death, you know, like her boring the images out of her head, you know, with a power drill, I think he says. You know, it's just like, oh shit, you know. And that's kind of this movie does well. It's like, we don't need all these graphic scenes. We don't need to see that happening, or then having some flashback to them all being a family and Jason torturing the kids. I mean, just Brian Cox's delivery of, you know, what, you know, him and his wife and son had to go through, and essentially that stuff pushing him to the person that he is now. You know, we get a really, really good character development of both of them within just, a couple minutes or whatnot. So, like I said before, I do not think he is a comic book character, and which is very strange for them to just shoehorn this kind of character in, and it works so well as far as for plot device and for character development. So, I really enjoy that scene, and even where, Professor X is kind of scared of Jason because he understands his powers. You know, he understands what he can do to even someone like Professor X. So it's a very, very powerful scene.
It is really well done. The backstory that they add in for Stryker, kind of bringing it home. You didn't need, at that point, you kind of just think that he's like this militant asshole who's just team human, anti-team mutant. And so then that's kind of the point of the movie where you're like, oh, okay, so his son mutant leads to his wife killing herself. He has a vendetta against against Professor X for failing. And when he wheels him in, he goes, "Let me introduce you to mutant number 149 or something like that." And it's just like, oh no, it's his son. Like he literally is just like so dead to me. Not my son. That's not my son. I don't associate. That's just mutant number 149. And it would appear that they kind of, and I like the Frankenstein monster look of him, where his skin and he has this like the incision marks on his head. Because assumptively he's not like a total paraplegic. He could have been, but he's not. Assumptively he's not totally comatose, like vegetative state. Before this, Stryker turns him into that, and he had like his because the wheelchair that he has is kind of pumping like the fluid through his brain that he mentions. He mentioned the fluid in his brain, and so his wheelchair setup is. I just like it that he's this evil version of Professor X. He's like the fucked up version of Professor X, Frankenstein's monster, and then you have that one moment, Lady Deathstrike looking at herself. Being like, wait a second, what am I? Oh, never mind. Great scene. It's not very long, but it's just enough to really anchor all the characters' motives home and put some more weight behind everything that's happening. And it's awesome. I really like like Jason's powers and how he's the great illusionist. My son, the great illusionist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome scene.
We cut back to everyone's in the X-Jet. The X-Jet is moving along. It's almost to Magneto and Mystique. And then the CGI that ages the worst of the movie is the two jets that pop up and they shoot these missiles at them. And it does not age well. I would say that's the only thing that really stood out is that it does not age, because the movie overall is incredibly grounded. I mean, Alkali Lake, the set, where they're going through corridors and they're going through, control rooms, and everything is very practically built. And when they have scenes where like the flood is happening and it's still, you're seeing real water shoot through like walls as it collapses. This movie for $110 million, which I know may have been a lot back then, but now that's nothing. he's really grounded. They do not rely on a lot of CGI other than for Rogue's powers, where she brings in the tornadoes to try to offset the jets.
Storm's power, Storm.
What did I say?
Rogue.
Damn it. So yeah, she brings down the tornadoes, and then I do love. Maybe you disagree with me, Jason, but I do love the flicker in the eyes of Jean Grey trying to disable the missiles, and I can see that cringe on your face.
Oh, my notes, I all caps, that Phoenix bullshit is what I wrote down during that stuff. Because, yeah, it's just these little hints of, the little Phoenix powers where I think it's just because this isn't a power that develops within her. This is a power that she attains. The Phoenix Force is something that's just flying around space, kind of thing. So it's just like, oh, come on, but that's the kind of the plot development storytelling that they wanted to do with her, that it's an innate power that's kind of, because the third movie starts of them in space and that thing hits them, right? That's how we start to get the Phoenix power in the very beginning of the third movie.
No, I believe you're thinking of Fantastic Four.
No. So they're on some space mission and they're trying to save something in there. This
isn't. It might be another.
You're thinking of the Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix movie, probably.
Yeah.
I never saw that. I just heard horrible things about it, but that's the only X-Men movie I never saw.
Which that's the beginning of X3. Yeah. Magneto and Charles go to Jean Grey's house when she's younger, and they're meeting with her and her parents then, and she has problems, but I can't remember, without looking it up, I can't remember if they mention anything about the Phoenix Force.
I don't think so. And I think it's probably just because, again, at this time, the universe is much smaller. We're not dealing with otherworldlies or aliens or anything like that. This is a story like the X-Men movie. It was built around America, how America perceives minorities, and that's the theme of the movies. It's very grounded, and so I don't mind the departure from the Phoenix Force idea, because it would be weird if all of a sudden you introduce space entities into these movies, just because these movies feel very much modern day or in the not too distant future.
See, I just take that as giving the audience credit to understanding that Jean Grey is a character that has this extra power within her, whether you interpret that as being extraterrestrial or just her own powers that are kind of tucked in deep within. Yeah. And it wouldn't necessarily be against Professor X's character to do to not tell her that she has this thing living inside her, because as Magneto states with Wolverine, Professor X knows Wolverine's background and chooses not to tell him. So just being like, you should just figure this out on your own. Probably because he's just scared that
the mind has to figure these things out for themselves.
Yes. So it doesn't necessarily, it seems within the realm of possibility that Professor X knows that she has the Phoenix Force living inside her, and it's just like, no, we'll be fine. We'll just, I'll help her kind of keep this under wraps. And then, but so that's kind of how I choose to interpret the Phoenix angle here, because they don't mention it really ever. But I like that scene, more storm powers, and I'm crazy. The idea of this one jet flying through a storm of tornadoes, just like the wind force, and it's like, oh yeah, as long as you don't hit the exact tornado, it's fine. Like the wind forces that would be going, it would shatter your jet to pieces. So scene doesn't really make any sense, but the powers look cool. Nightcrawler teleporting out. Magneto's.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Maybe Storm's tornadoes are so just contained within the visual atmosphere. Maybe. Yes.
But then them being saved by Magneto, which I can't remember if it's really clear if they're going to meet him or he just meets them in the middle.
Yeah,
and they were going to Boston to meet up with Logan. I think because they're last communicating with Logan. So I think that Magneto and her are just like, oh no, we're gonna go meet up with them, and then they meet them.
That could be.
That could be wrong.
So then there's the meeting of the minds, where everyone is talking. From this moment, we finally get a lot more of Magneto, and I love Magneto just belittles everyone. He just belittles Wolverine. And he's like, oh yeah, but Charles gives you much more credit than I do, and the dig at Rogue, and he's just very much. You can tell that he's written to just be very much one step, two steps ahead of everyone else.
Once again, you think it's all about you.
Yeah.
And it's really cool just to see without Professor X, he really does just gets everyone to go along with his plan. And I'll let you talk about that scene that we're about to get to, which is when he overrides Wolverine, and he's like, "We're not going to send you. We're going to send her." And they just let Magneto lead them, and they're like, hopefully he's not up to anything nefarious.
I mean, and going back to my point earlier where, Magneto is the leader of the X-Men for a good point of time, multiple times throughout the comic book history. So even him kind of falling into that role, that leadership, and everyone going with him. But same goal, I guess, but different ways of doing it with him and Xavier. But yeah, such a cool, powerful scene of Magneto. And then, Wolverine being pushed aside so Mystique can do his job better than him, Yeah, great scene. Yeah, and Kurt and Rogue even having, there's a lot of little conversations that go on within that scene too. That's where Wolverine and Jean start the little hard makeout session where it's a little like rapey, where he's like really.
Oh no!
She was into it.
She stopped.
Like that.
Yeah. Where she is like, please stop kissing my face as hard as you are right now, or something. I date the bad boys, but I marry the Boy Scout or something.
You don't marry the, what is it? You bring home the good guy, or it's like, I married a good guy. Like, you don't bring home the bad boy, whatever she says. Yeah.
And then Mystique creepily watching.
Now let's talk about rape now, Jason.
Yeah, well, and then this escalates even more, but it's great with her and Kurt first talking about, being blue skinned, and why wouldn't you walk around like this? Or it's a great line. I'm going to mess it up, but
shouldn't have to.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to, and that's just, of course, just moving this mutant to, kind of agenda of, we're not going to hide, want to be out there in the open. And, but yeah, her creepily watching and then be like, I know what I'm about to do. She immediately gets up right after there, changes into Jean Grey and then runs into his tent, and choosing all of the different women in his life, even Rogue and things like that.
Rogue still creepy because how old is she?
Yeah. So that's the tense scene.
Maybe she transformed into 18-year-old Rogue.
Yeah, or comic book version of Rogue, But and then being Stryker and just being all these people in his tent, kind of thing. It's just a very strange scene, but yeah, I like a lot of the different characters that we see different sides of during that time.
We finally get to Alkali Lake, and that's when, to your scene that you mentioned earlier, Jason, when Magneto overrides everyone and he's like, we're going to send, or hints at, doesn't explicitly say, so the audience can kind of have people sit behind, but doesn't explicitly say, but sends Mystique over. And you guys talked about her abilities in Mission earlier, but my God.
Yeah.
Like watching her, that's what's so great about the Mystique character in the first movie and in this movie, is that it's not just she just walks around and kicks everyone's ass. She is super methodical and is extremely good at being a espionage, a covert agent. Mm-hmm. And in this scene, multiple times over, I'll let you take over since you were very passionate about this. Multiple times over, we get to see her genius of not just being this badass and kick-ass fighter, but also just really smart.
And it's so much that talk of Magneto, talking her up, Mystique can do all this, everything better than you, she, you're just going to claw at it where she can open up these doors herself. And so she really shows that, really proves that, and yeah, taking out a whole room of people. But Stryker's line of, I think it's, I know my own work, or I know my own projects, or something along those lines, and then her just getting out of that, very cool restraining thing. Where is that built just for Wolverine? So if the claws went off, they went straight into his head, or is this just a mutant detaining device? And that she breaks out of that, flips around that whole room, takes out at least fucking like 20 plus people, and then slides backwards, flicking off the camera. Like that scene right there is another just great one. I don't know how you're physically sliding backwards on your naked body on the concrete floor, but we'll leave that aside. With just that little like middle finger as she's going through the door, and then just immediately into that room, headsets on, and then just clicking away at the keyboard. Yeah, it just proves of how much of a Mission Impossible agent that she could be. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the line that she uses when she briefly turns into Stryker? She turns into Stryker and she's like, shut down this or that. And she's like, could be anybody.
Oh, walking in the room and then takes the gun and like just
takes the gun, just whips the two out real quick.
Yeah.
And then waves. Just as Stryker
and waves.
You know, yeah.
So fantastic. So sick. She is, yeah, like I said, in the running for MVP of this movie. She's so awesome. She's so dope in this scene. I love the variety of how you can use her, and she's so smart. And the way that they shoot it, of like, as when she walks into the room of Stryker, it's so fast and cut so well that you do think it's Stryker until she whips the dude with the gun. You're just like, oh, all right, I guess this is Mystique. Like, and it's all happening at such a pace that even the guard, like even the soldiers are caught off guard. And so that intro scene is just another in the very great line of Mystique moments in this movie. I really, really enjoy it.
And Stryker learns from that, because later he's like, kill anyone who comes.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Wait, I forgot my gum. Damn.
Oh no, I'm gonna get killed. It's not worth it. Yeah.
So then it becomes a mad dash to stop Jason from getting Professor X to kill all mutants, and all the mutants start to struggle. In the middle of struggling, you have Jean Grey comes across Cyclops, and they start to have a fight, and we finally get a little more Cyclops action, but he is subdued by the superior mutant. This is one lover's quarrel. I think we should get out, or
we can't get involved in, my dear. Yeah.
And so that's when everyone's fighting, and then Magneto finally comes in. Great touch is that Jason just looks up at him and he just points to his helmet.
Not getting in here. Yeah. Which, man, little girl version of Jason is kind of creepy, man. Like, it's
with the 2-eye color.
Yeah, like in the mansion scenes where she's just like kind of, coaxing Charles to kind of help, but then she turns into like just this little like movie with the two girls in the hallway with the blood. Shining. Yeah, like these horror movie girls, that you kind of see. So yeah, I thought that was a very cool twist on what he becomes in people's heads.
That is a very good, astute connection.
Mm-hmm.
You get the Magneto turning it on its head, and now Jason is being told to tell Professor X to wipe out all humans, and then the dynamics quickly change, because all the mutants go from struggling, and now all the human characters, we see the president struggling. Yes.
So and then while also those are going on, I like that the group comes in together, and then everybody separates to do their own jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Wolverine is just like, fuck y'all, I'm going after Stryker. He's like, I'm dead set on this mission. Like, he's like, he basically just assumes that everybody else will be fine. Like, you guys got this. And then he heads off. Jean Grey goes with Magneto and Mystique initially, and everyone's kind of giving them the eyes, like, you good? You good going, like, being the one X-Men with these two? And she's like, yeah, it'll be fine. And then you have Storm and Nightcrawler go to save the kids. So everybody kind of gets their own little mission to do. And they're just like it because it's, this big maze. So they never really run into each other so much. And then everybody has their own jobs to do. And so, but then when we build into, Magneto has that. And then we build into which, did they shoot this at Hoover Dam? Outside scenes?
No.
Very Hoover Dam-y.
Is it?
It just
does feel like it, yeah.
Cool.
Very classic.
I don't know.
Maybe that's just me being an idiot and pulling out the one famous dam I know, but
wait, there's Hoover Dam, and then which is the one in Vegas?
That's Hoover Dam, yeah.
I'm an idiot. I know that other Hoover Dam.
So, and then it builds into the very, I really like.
Oh, it's not Hoover Dam because that's the James Bond one, which is very different. Sorry.
I don't know, maybe it's Jason who wasn't a big fan of it, but I really like the fight scene between Lady Deathstrike and Logan.
The character, yes, that is a great fight scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and Stryker doesn't say a lot, actually. He kind of goes through the scene pretty quick, but has a good line. The thing about adamantium is he's like, you got to keep it hot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So once it cools, it becomes indestructible. That's one thing about Stryker, that man's apparently a brilliant scientist, does not talk like a scientist. That's the only thing I have to say.
He's
about
dumbing
him.
it down for him.
He really is dumbing it down. Like, I'm a scientist. When I make something, I got to make sure it works.
I think
like, he says these things.
There's like 3 writers. There's like 3 dudes with the story. That's like Bryan Singer and Zach Penn. And then there's like 3 writers. And I feel like at that point, towards the end of the movie, they're just like, we don't need to talk to scientists to get how he talks. Well, just here's comic book lines.
But that scene between Deathstrike and Logan is sick. You get the, again, just the difference in how Logan's fights go in this versus X-Men 1, night and day. Like when they're hitting and throwing each other, it's way better. It's much more chaotic and not just somebody being pulled on a string.
And I mean, it looks like it hurts a lot of the things that she's doing to him, you know, like the little stabby things. Yeah. And then in the throat and stuff like that, you're just like, oh, that's gotta hurt, no matter, even if you do have a healing factor, you know. Mm-hmm. But the tink of her hitting her head as the death, where she's just full of adamantium, just hitting the bottom of the water. Yeah, that's a classic noise
which we get that in that moment where she gets stabbed, you get back to that kind of tragedy of she does not look evil at all in that moment. There's just kind of a somber sadness of like,
yeah, Logan gives her he looks away a little bit when he sees it pouring out of her orifices, which awesome detail, out of the eyes and dripping from the lips. Looks, he's not happy. I mean, this is a pretty bloodthirsty man, and he's like, oh, that's a little.
I mean, but he essentially just killed an innocent woman. I mean, she did not understand what she was doing, you know, and that's another, I think, reason why I hate that character, what they did with her, because it was just such a throwaway villain, you know, and killing her at the end and then that way and not getting her any sort of retribution for her actions or coming out of it or something like that. Because I would at least like to see her come out of it and be like, Logan, tell my father I love him or something. And then that's just like, you know, or something like that, where it's like we get something where a redemption of this character, or
she could have actually given a reference to her and Logan's past relationship, and like, we'll always have Bali.
Exactly, and he's like, "Wait, what? What? No." Yeah, see, they could have gone, you know, multiple directions, but as much as I didn't like her portrayal of that fight scene,
I love the touch of him stabbing her. And then she's like stunned for a second. And then you just get the overhead camera shot of her wrapping her fingers around his wrist and then starts to climb.
He pushes her body off of him to get out off of his, you know, claws that are inside of her. Yeah. That is a great shot with the camera too.
Yeah. Wolverine chasing down I love the delivery of the line. I think of this line all the time. Stryker's making a run for it. He's trying to get to the helicopter to get the fuck out of there. And Wolverine gets to him, stabs him in the rib cage.
Yeah, I'm known too.
How does it feel, Bub? Oh.
No, that's the first time we hear Bub, you know, him actually say Bub line. Yeah. But no, you jumped a little far ahead.
Did I though, Jason?
Oh, yeah, well, we hadn't.
You wanted revenge. You wanted to get on me for jumping ahead. That's literally the next thing.
You're right.
His character.
No, we go to the kids, because I'm sick of this kids table shit, you know, is when Pyro walks out of we get a little bit into the plane right there. And then, dude, one of the best scenes is actually them at the Cerebro door, where Stryker's already said, if you see anyone coming here, shoot them. And all the guards are sitting there, and all the pins on their grenades start to shake. And it pulls every pin out, and the reaction of every guy there, they're just like, oh, no. And then just all of them and it should be much more gruesome than portrayed. Red walls and body parts just dripping. But yeah, Magneto pulling all the pins out of everyone, and then Magneto putting on the helmet, and then that kind of part of it, you know, we just quickly jumped over. But yeah, the how does it feel, bub, is that next one where him and Stryker have that little conversation where it's like, yeah, Stryker trying to win Wolverine back over, and he's like, oh, I thought I was just an animal, an animal on the loose, and now you're saying that I'm the only person that can give you the answers and things like that. So it's funny to see that weakness in Stryker. He had been such a strong character, such a I don't need anyone else, and then him pretty much begging Wolverine for his life. It's just like, oh shit, man, okay, but don't do it, Wolverine. Don't don't go with it.
There's the it is the arc of Wolverine's character, which is his initial mission from the first movie is to figure out his past, and in this movie he ends up having a choice, a moment where he could learn more about his past if he wanted to save Stryker, but he chooses to abandon his quest to figure out his past in order to embrace his future, which is being a part of the X-Men.
Takes off that's the moment when he goes back. So a little bit of a jump here, but he goes back to see Stryker and he takes off his dog tags and throws him down.
Oh yeah, but no, this is when he leaves the helicopter, chains him up, and then he runs back into the dam to try to save everyone, because they're all trying to run to the spillway, and he comes there at the last second and closes the spillway, which is such a great scene where the doors are closing and the water's like spurting out through the cracks, as it's closing right there. He's like, yeah, you shouldn't go that way. But I think it's either Gene or someone asks, are you all right? And he's like, yeah, I finally am, or something. He has some like line that he says that he just mentally got some closure with his life and he's ready to be like a professor at the school, be involved with the X-Men and stuff. So it was really cool that conversation with Stryker was, changed his life essentially,
We get and then the one scene before that we didn't just briefly talk about is just, I like the little final tie-in for Kurt's character, which is the leap of faith.
Through the cerebral wall.
Through the wall. He says he can't do it, and it kind of is the culmination of his conversations with Storm, and she's kind of the one that to kind of push him to it. It's just a nice. It's not overstated, but it's nice.
Nightcrawler for the win, though. I mean, because if Nightcrawler wasn't there and wasn't on their team, and they hadn't there's no way they could have gotten into Cerebro in time to save all the mutants, or humans at that point. It's mutants with the cold, and then Storm freezing out Jason and everyone in that room. If Nightcrawler didn't get her in there, it would have Stryker's plan would have been successful. So it's like,
well, no, it would have been the humans would have died at that moment because that was the point when she jumps in. It's to save all the humans.
Oh, because it's not affecting them at that point.
Right.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is cool to see Nightcrawler. It would have been cool to see Nightcrawler get into more fights, but after that first scene and who his character is, this man of faith, doesn't seem like this would be a man of action or a man of violence. And from then on, we see him multiple times saving people, and that's kind of his asset that he brings to the team is his ability to save people, which I think is really cool for his character. And then, yes, the leap of faith, great way of bringing that along. And then
creepy girl just standing there. What are you looking for? She's like, oh God, I'm good. I'm out of here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they just leave Jason to die. Like, fuck you, dude.
Yes,
way too much.
Something I wrote down where he gets Charles out and you see like something crush right where he was sitting and on the other side of Jason, and then don't see Jason at all anymore, and that's so un-X-Men where you would have just still saved the bad guy who, you would have been carrying him out or something like that, which, oh my God, I might be jumping forward, but the Wolverine carrying that kid around for like 2 scenes, where he's got the little boy in his arms is so weird. It's so fucking weird. And I think about the actor where the kid, where it's like, okay, you just got to be in the scene in his arms and you're just going to flick your tongue out at the end. It's like, yeah, I thought that was so strange how much he's carrying him. And then he sets him down at one point to take off the dog tags and throw him at Stryker. And then he picks the kid back up. It's like, so wait, why were you holding him? Because he didn't want his feet to get cold in the snow. It's like, what is the point of this? So I think I did jump ahead.
No, that's all right. When we're in the end game now, it is a little sloppy right there because we have to get on the helicopters. Helicopters are gone because Magneto has him and Mystique have bounced with Pyro, and then he goes with him. And it's just a setup because we're not getting too much of his character now, but we could get it in a third movie. but it felt very, very sloppy to have. It's a mad dash. We have to get on the extra. The extra's gone, and then you get Rogue piloting the extra.
Oh God!
I mean, just sloppy. They just didn't have an idea of what to do, so they're like, "All right, she pilots it, crashes, she's freaking out."
First time ever flying a plane ever, and
This must be easy. This is barely. This is not a problem.
And the
Who's the guy's name?
Screen Rant.
I apologize.
Isn't it Screen Rant?
It's Screen Rant, but I forget the fellow's name that does all those movie breakdowns, movie pitch meetings guy.
Meetings.
Yeah, no, for sure. Shout out that guy because that line is very applicable in a lot of movies.
Wouldn't it be hard for her to learn how to pilot a jet? Nope, not at all. Barely inconvenient.
It's not some regular jet either. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a stealth fighter jet. Like, what are we doing here? It's a stealth bomber, basically.
With nuclear engine on it or something like that. Yeah, let's just have her crash.
So that was just, sloppy. And then, it's just, we have to get on the jet. And then it's like, oh, I'm just going to walk back to Stryker to give him one last little dig and then walk back as everything's collapsing. It's just very much sloppy, the sloppiest part of the movie.
And then the Jean scene, and just, God.
Oh.
Like, so why does she have to be outside the plane? There's no reason that you need to be standing outside as I'm pushing this plane up to block this water. She could be on top of the plane. She could be inside the plane and doing any of this stuff. I mean, it is just... Okay, so an X-Men fan going into that scene, you know what's going to happen. Because Jean Grey does die in the comic books underwater and is in a cocoon while a double of her, Madeline Pryor, comes back to the X-Men and is almost like a fake Jean Grey for a long time, where ends up marrying Cyclops and doing a lot of stuff. So this Madeline Pryor character is kind of what they're even hinting at her by this water death scene. Because it's this really weird part of it where she's in the cocoon and then it has something to do with the Phoenix Force at the same time too. So, and then even with the ending where they're going over the water and you see that Phoenix bird and it's actually her doing the narrative, you're like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. You're setting up that storytelling or that plot thread in the future. But I mean, so poorly executed where blocking everyone's powers, being outside, and it's just a very sloppy death scene for her and that whole ending to it. It's cringy to me. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not done perfectly, but I do like it gives the movie weight to have an X-Men sacrifice themselves for the good of the group, as opposed to the very neat and tidy, say, Guardians 3. And it's like, oh, we go on this adventure and, there's all these consequences. Everyone could die and then no one dies. And it's like, this really does give it and she is, her and Storm are the leaders of the X-Men for most of this movie. And she does have to go. She is the most powerful one. So it makes sense that while Professor X is in the state that he's in, she can go out and stop the water from coming and then also lifting it. I do like the touch. And then it's a beautiful setup for a third movie that could have really flushed out the Phoenix saga, and we didn't get that. But how did you feel about that sequence?
I like it. I like it because, I forget the word you just used, but I wrote it down as it anchors the end of the movie as having somebody needs to die. Nobody dies in X-Men 1 except for Senator Kelly, so nobody really cares. And Sabretooth, I guess, technically dies. Same with Toad. They get flown off.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we never get to see what happened to them into this movie.
Yeah, they just, they tucked their tail and ran. But so I think a good superhero movie, or you don't have to have a hero's death, but it does really help because it can't, the idea that you just get to be heroes all the time and nothing ever goes wrong. It feels shallow. So I really like that they have her sacrifice herself. I think it has a very, Yoda on Dagobah lifting the X-Wing vibe. Her just pulling slowly. So there's that. I think that she goes outside because I take it as she goes outside the ship because she understands. She's really nervously understands the power within her, and she knows that something bad is going to happen. And so she kind of removes herself from the situation and just being like, because I think she starts crying.
Oh yeah, no, she goes into Charles's head, and Charles is acting
Right.
like her, and Scott is like face to face, like, don't go anywhere. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, it is very strange. I guess if you're used to that, like both of them grew up in the X Mansion, and like you're used to communicating through him with other people. So I guess maybe it's just like you're not even seeing anymore.
You just use him like a phone. You're just like, hey, Gene, get over here, Gene.
Yeah. I mean, even Patrick Stewart at the end of it, he does this like he does this like little thing, and like how it would be like she would react or something to it. He gets a little feminine with his facial movements and stuff.
Yeah, so I like the scene. I think it's a good way to end the movie, and I like that. Yeah, at the very end, she's narrating, and the flyover with the Phoenix as kind of shape over the wall.
I remember being in the theater when that happened, and me being like, "Oh yeah, and everyone being like, "What the fuck is this? What's going on? Why is there significance of this thing?" You know, it's like it was such too insider, you know, as far as that.
Really?
Yeah. They all go to the president to do a crazy plan that so crazy it might just work, which is the president's freaked out because they almost assassinated him. He's now going to pass this Mutant Registration Act and all of these things. And they freeze everyone while he's about to go live on television. And they all get in as there's lightning happening. And they're like, we don't want you to pass this.
In the shadows, yeah.
This isn't a threat.
Yeah, this isn't a threat, but we'll be watching. And they give him the document that shows that William Stryker was attempting to murder all the...
Up to no good.
He was up to no good. And then they just go on faith that he's going to be like, wow, I think those people are actually pretty cool. Like,
dude, the most villainous looking scene like ever.
Just the lightning, they're all just like, go ahead, sign it.
And Nightcrawler being back in that room, whose last time that he saw him, he was murdering him. So it's like, you guys aren't selling your case very well, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
But it has such a great movie, and those two last scenes kind of being such like a debauchery of the comic books and stuff. But I mean, his storytelling, plot threads, tying them up well. But I mean, I love the movie, and then it's just like right at the end, you know. So
the voiceover that Jean Grey gives at the end of this movie is the same voiceover that Professor X gives at the beginning of the first movie, and the line is so great because it sets it up so well. I'm just so angry that X-Men 3 did not come through because she's, the monologue is, once every few millennia, what's the lie? It's once every few millennia.
Oh,
evolution.
Evolution takes a leap. And so it's like showing the Phoenix Force from underneath Alkali Lake. And it's like, oh, like this is the next, we've just gotten, like we went from humans to mutants. And now this is the next big thing that could come down. And it sets it up so well for the third movie that just absolutely botched it. Some point in the future, in the near future, we'll be able to pull up ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And we're just going to type in, give me an X-Men 3 movie with all the same actors, but that doesn't suck. And then we'll just...
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, the reason why X-Men 3 ends up sucking because Bryan Singer chose to leave the X-Men franchise to go make Superman Returns. And so instead of following through and watching over the story and all of the things that are set up in this movie that we're supposed to go into the next movie, he is gone. He's not a writer. He's not he's not nothing. Maybe a producer credit, but he's really gone from this movie because he wanted to make Superman Return so badly. And what we ended up getting was 2 mediocre superhero movies with Brett Ratner directing from the Rush movies. He ends up directing X-Men 3, and X-Men 3 was it was a movie I saw twice opening day because I was so dumbfounded the first time I saw it that in the morning, shout out Jamin Sock, we went and saw the first showing in the morning, and I was just so angry and confused because of all the things that happened to the characters. And then everyone was going to see it tonight, so I'm like, well, I'll go see it again because it couldn't have been what I just saw. And it's still the same movie, but I saw it twice.
That's unfortunate.
And somehow not even close to the worst X-Men movie. That's the craziest.
It still has some great scenes.
It has some great scenes. Yeah. Magneto's still good.
Still good.
Wolverine's still good. And there's some good action.
Pyro and Bobby.
Bobby, you get Beast, who doesn't look great, but he's like there.
Yeah.
You get Juggernaut, who's a little
goofy,
but still.
Yeah, it's still a great. The music, as I mentioned before, is great, and I do like the fight between Pinhead or whatever the hell, and Juggernaut versus versus Wolverine and Storm. There is that. So there are things in that movie that I really do like, but just unfortunately, that movie did not nearly come close to finishing the great setups that were put forth in this movie.
I mean, just like Star Wars, sequel movies where keeps the mantle gets passed between different directors and things like that, where they're not all on the same page. It can ruin the franchise essentially. But yeah, good movie. Yeah.
Okay, so we've come to the end. So first thing we're gonna do is give out an MVP. There's so many characters in this movie. It's one of the few movies that justifies so many Easter eggs because you can't possibly fit all the X-Men into a cohesive narrative into one movie or even two movies. So we mentioned all the Easter eggs that came before and all the people that they mentioned is really cool touches and things. But which character in this movie stands out amongst the pantheon of greatness? Who is the MVP? Remington.
Hugh Jackman. Still my MVP. A close argument could be made for Stryker. Stryker would be my 2 and Mystique would be my 3 just because I think they do the most. But Hugh Jackman, this is, and maybe I do admittedly probably put a bit of hindsight 2020 on this one because knowing how great Hugh Jackman becomes. But I think this is just that step that showed like, okay, he is, of all the X characters, he is the premier character. When he's on screen, he's the best. He's either hilarious or he's terrifying, or just everything that happens with his character in this movie is so good, and his acting is so on point, and he's such an enjoyable character that I just think you can't have this movie without him, even with the ensemble cast that we have.
For me, it's either Mystique or Nightcrawler, those two, and gun to the head, it would be Mystique. She is such a great addition to this movie. And I think we've harped enough on why, but she would definitely be my MVP.
Hugh Jackman is probably the unbiased, linchpin of the movie. But I'm such a Stryker simp. I am such a Brian Cox as William Stryker simp. I've already talked about it, but he is so incredible. His acting he's just a level of acting. He does not know he's in a kid's movie. He is not he brings a complete Oscar type of performance, when he's interrogating or setting up the interrogation with Magneto, and he's getting right in his face and his eyes are just dashing between each eye. And I love the little things. My boy. The look on his face when he says that, or earlier when Mystique is pretending to be Senator Kelly, and she's like,
"This facility is a school."
Sure it is.
Just things like the look in his eye. When Wolverine it stabs him and he's interrogating him, you are just a failed experiment. Everything he does, I love every scene he's in. He steals every scene he's in for me. I love Brian Cox so much, and I really appreciate the fact that he's finally given his worldwide credit as not just a secondary actor in a movie. That he is in Succession. He is so incredible, and I'm really happy that he's finally gotten his due in his mid-70s. I love Stryker. I love Brian Cox as William Stryker in this movie.
I'm gonna get you a shirt that says "I Heart Cox."
That's right.
I will not turn that down. If it has Brian Cox's face on it, do that.
With his face inside of the heart.
There you go. Nice.
Rating. Movie rating for this movie. On whatever scale you want.
On a scale of 1 to 7, I give it a 6.
6?
A 6.
I think percentage-wise, it's pretty low. I don't even think that's barely a pass.
6.5. All right. On a scale of 1 to 7, I give it a 6.5. I love this movie. It's not quite a 10 because the rogue and the little kitty stuff, it's not terrible. It's not great. It's just very mid and sometimes not great. But so there's just little things here and there that don't make it like a solid, perfect movie for me. But 6.5 out of 7.
I have a very hard time rating this movie, actually. When we talk about, I've just been a thumbs up, and I don't think I can do that on this movie because I absolutely love it. It's a great movie. But then the comic book accuracies, that I try not to hold a movie to. I want it to be your own vision of it. It was too much for me this watch this time. So I'm giving it like a this thumbs up, not like this, but like
45 degrees.
A sideways one, because it's great. I'll always rewatch it, like I said, but it's like that stuff is starting, I guess, to mean to me more now in my older age.
9 out of 10. This is one of the greatest comic book movies. It's a character piece where to balance so many characters, and it didn't need a whole phase of here's Wolverine's movie, here's Storm's movie, here's this person's movie, which is what the MCU kind of lucked into, that just happened to work, where you were able to have a whole movie dedicated to fleshing out these characters. We don't have that luxury. We had the first movie that kind of touched upon them, but this movie really you feel like you're watching the X-Men. You feel like Cyclops is Cyclops, Wolverine's Wolverine, so on and so forth. Professor X, and Nightcrawler is just so wonderful in this movie, and Magneto, and everyone is so great that it is a joy to watch this movie 20 years later. It stands the test of time. Other movies could take note on how to handle actors and adaptations for this movie. It's one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, but also one of my favorite movies of all time.
I would definitely agree.
Yeah, it's up there, definitely.
And that's last pick.
Like, is it happening?